We must all come to know that a nation is not just a geographical boundary, but it is a philosophical and biological entity. The people in the nation are accustomed to think, act, and follow a lifestyle automatically, often without the theoretical and intellectual cognition of the values they are following. This is the common man's value sense, and it is the most important value sense because that ultimately determines the history of the nation. Any change in the environment, whether political, economic, commercial, and technological, or in any other manner, it is recognized or reacted upon through the intuitive process of cultural heritage. I am using the word this intuitive process and cultural heritage. Alterations in some of the value sense occur according to the situation in keeping with the traditions of the society. Here, the society really acts like a biological organism. When the change is hostile, when change is becoming melancholic, it acts for its survival, and when the change is congenial for growth, it proliferates and enriches itself. This has been again and again in the history of any country, even in our country and many other nations with a long history. Every nation reacts to such situations in its own accustomed ways, and there lies its true value and sense of source of strength and or weakness. India, this is our country, throughout the history has been successful nation commercially, intellectually, and culturally. Political failure and subjugation by the foreign power has been our bane, has been our sadness, has been our bad luck, preventing continuous and sustained growth in the field of cultural and the value system. When we talk about traditional values, we have to ask what this value is. Value refers to something valuable, a wealth of which we call sampada traditionally. Classification of values has been done, Bhagavad Gita, into Daivi Sampada and Asur Sampad. Daivi Sampad and Asura Sampad. And it will remain relevant for humanity as long as man survives. The former is of eternal value and all societies, and latter of the temporary, the benefit of leading degeneration. And another note, great Bhagavad Gita told, and Krishna advised to Arjuna to do not things in a Rakshasa manner, but do things in a Daivi Sampadik manner. The valor, the love, all seem to be acceptable within the value sense with the right motive and modality. I am using these two words, right motive and modality. However, when we talk of value education, we are talking of society as a whole and not individuals, rising towards greater influence of Daivi Sampada, which we have to be careful because wrong emphasis on certain minds may be harmful. It can never be 100% in any society, and it cannot be done through condemnation but through reorientation of the attributes towards greater goodness. This reorientation to the society, not condemning totally the traditional values, but building the new values because of the scientific temper, science contribution, and all those things depend on the philosophers, thinkers of that society at that particular juncture of the history of the society. It is their duty to lead the society in a dynamic way, to convert the society into a dynamic society with goodness of thinking for humanity, with all human values which are useful for balanced, harmonious, and leading a beautiful life by the society. Our country, India, had so much of past. During each such epoch, who have reacted by folding up into a cocoon, and restrictive values sprang up in the name of religion, the society and the individual liberties got curtailed. Thus, a sea voyage was totally banned in a successful and dynamic seafaring nation, and surprisingly, the moratorium was successful in total. A country that had developed sublime and dynamic religious philosophies and propagated them boldly to the world through ambassadors who braved expeditions to alien countries and cultures, but ceded their ideas for global transmission, folded down with religious injunctions when faced with hostile alien conquering culture. Alien conquering culture hostile at times, not only at times, many times happened to our country because of so many invasions. So many invaders brought their own culture, their own ideas of the society and social life. Professor John Wheeler, who occupies the chair in Princeton University, that is once occupied by the Einstein, and who has guided students like Richard Feynman and a host of their Nobel laureates, wrote in a letter to a monk of the Ramakrishna order, "My wonderful mentor had gone into deep interest into the Upanishads. More, he told me, in the questions than in the answers. I like to think that someone will trace out how the deepest thinking of India made its way to Greece, and from there to philosophy of our times. Your wonderful analysis of the great questions inspires us all in the great search that follows the spirit of Upanishads, of Plato's dialogues and modern science." That is where I am not pulling that what all we have inherited as culture, cultural heritage or Daivi Sampada in our country is above criticism or is above all. But definitely there is a cultural heritage which is available to take the help of them in order to face the changing society, social problems which are being thrown in the form of challenge by the present atmosphere of the world society. That can be done duly using our Daivi Sampada and also studying the modern society, the changing culture, the changing value pattern which are being thrown with all powerful velocity by the Western society, Western education, Western orientation, Western thinking. Where there is actually conflict between our traditional heritage and what the challenges are thrown by the West. There lies the difference. There lies the role of philosophers. There lies the role of Indian intellectuals in order to analyze and show the way. We know historically thoughts of Socrates and Plato and the latter age of the Neoplatonists were profoundly influenced by Upanishads. This is an absolute fact. I think we can see the influence of ideals of the Upanishads in the Western history after Renaissance and seeded with these ideas from the near caste. Men, women jumped into the unknown both physically and intellectually, facing personal danger without any regard to the material comforts of a settled life. Intellectually, they challenged the dogmatic ideas of several societies and brought forth rationalism. If rationalism died down in Europe also for some time after the closure of Plato's Academy, following the famous address of St. Paul, physically they injured into the unknown and enriched the history of humanity. They injured himself but enriched the history of humanity. All this could not have been possible without underlying sensation of the impermanence and futility of material life. This is the crux of Indian philosophy. Sensation of the impermanence and futility of absolute material life or total concentration on these worldly comforts. See, nowhere Indian philosophy has condemned material comfort and thinking about the body or sensual pleasures, but beyond limits anything being done that hurts society and that else. So this is a philosophy which can bring samskara, that refinement which is a necessity to society, whether it is Western philosophy or our own cultural heritage and philosophy. The ultimate goal is human happiness. The ultimate goal is social harmony, social equilibrium with all Daivi Sampada, that is good literature, good thought which we have inherited through several texts of our cultural heritage has to be utilized. And we are Indians in epoch expansion of a free India after thousands of years of darkness and poised to take on a globalized world. It is inevitable to face this globalized world that has grown smaller through technology with more intimate people to people contact than ever dreamt in the past. The present epoch is congenial for our growth and intellectual and philosophical expansion. The older generation is fortunate to have seen the beginning of the process, but the younger generation has not. We have seen the self-confidence and the self-respect that were generated in this sleeping country through the teachings of our deepest and ancient thoughts by people like Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, Aurobindo, several intellectuals, and the modern philosophers like Radhakrishnan have built beautifully the bridges between the coming scientific temper, the necessity of absorbing the scientific knowledge, duly taking into consideration our own cultural heritage, harmonizing them and bridging the gulf between modernity and the past, and traveling with all joy and happiness. So let us examine the value sense that drives the young generation of today. They are more assertive and dynamic go-getters than the laid-back attitudes of the past generations. That can be considered a value addition and in keeping with the roots of our culture that we had forgotten for 1,000 years. This is a rise of philosophy, young philosophy, looking at the Karma Yoga, keeping the principles explained in Karma Yoga and explained by them enshrined in the Bhagavad Gita. The youth of today are revolting against any restriction to personal freedom and individual choice. This is the culture. I repeat that restriction to personal freedom and individual choice no more we can impose on the present young generation of the society. Hence it is the duty of the society and intellectuals in our country to make a harmonious analysis and give them a new path where their ambitions and aspirations need not be surrendered, and at the same time bridging a good bridge between our ancient heritage and traditional cultural heritage, which can make their happiness, which make their life happiness with an objective to live, not totally dedicating life for the material comfort. Enjoy the material comfort with all sensual pleasures, but keep an eye on your tradition and past, which has given several methods and solutions to live happily and peacefully. This is the job of now, whether it is educational philosophers or social philosophers, any sort of thinkers through literature or art and dance or everything. That ultimate goal is human happiness in general and happiness of our society, Indian society, to be happy by removing all the restrictions imposed in the form of caste, society, social philosophy, unnecessarily thinking about the past in an overemphasized manner, and unnecessary depending on totally the new value system which is not congenial for leading a balanced and harmonious life, because we have come from a different culture and heritage. This beautiful harmonizing, this beautiful process of bridging that disparity into zero is the duty of social philosophers and specifically educational philosophers to bring happiness in the lives of this country. Thank you very much.